Hello and welcome to this lesson on Kubernetes objects. Entities in Kubernetes are referred to as Kubernetes objects. Objects are basically persistent entities that exist in your cluster and represent the state of your cluster. You can think of it as a record of intent. That is, once you create the object, the Kubernetes system will ensure that your object will exist in this cluster. You can create, modify, and delete Kubernetes objects using the K8S API. You can use the kubectl command line tool to make things easier, and this kubectl tool will make the necessary API calls for you behind the scenes. For example, you can run the kubectl run command with a pod name and a specific Docker image to create a pod with this image. If the Docker image exists locally, it'll get picked up, else it'll be pulled from Docker Hub. Almost all K8 objects include two fields that govern the object's configuration. One is the spec field, which represents the desired state of your object, and the second is the status field, which represents the current state of your object. The Kubernetes control plane continually tries to ensure that your object's current state matches the applied desired state. So here I have on my local system, Docker desktop is already installed and I have Kubernetes enabled in settings. As you can see, because this is a local cluster that's meant only for dev purposes, it only creates a single node cluster. Before I begin, I want to ensure that my kubectl CLI tool is connected to the right cluster. This is especially the case when you have connections to more than one cluster. So in this case, I want to ensure that I'm connected to Docker desktop, which I can do by typing kubectl config current context. As you can see, I'm already connected to Docker desktop, but if I wasn't connected, you can type the set context command to set your context to Docker desktop. If you ever need help with commands, you can always type --help and kubectl will give you options. And as you can see here, I can use the set context command to set my context. Alternatively, you can also set your context directly in your kubeconfig file. But in this case, I'm going to do it via CLI. So kubeconfig set context Docker desktop. And if I run current context again, you can see I'm still on Docker desktop. kubectl comes with a command to get the list of pods, which is kubectl get pods. Pods have an abbreviation called PO, which you can use instead of pods. So if I do kubectl get PO, it's the same as kubectl get pods. And as you can see, our cluster currently does not contain any pods. I can do kubectl get nodes or get no for short to see the nodes in my cluster. And as I mentioned earlier, Docker desktop only starts a single node cluster. To create a pod, I'm going to use the kubectl run command with my pod as the pod name and image as nginx. The pod will get created, and if I do kubectl get pods again, you can see that my pod is currently has a status of container is creating, and after a while, if you check, your pod should be running and the ready field shows how many containers are ready. In this case, one out of the expected one are ready. My pod hasn't restarted so far and has an age showing that was recently created. If you'd like more information to be displayed when you get the list of pods, you can pass in a flag, kubectl get PO -o space wide, and this shows some more information like IP, node, etc. If you want to see the entire pod object, you can do a kubectl describe like so. And for now, we'll keep on looking at what's inside this description in great detail. But I just want you to be aware of this command because you'll be using this a lot to understand the state of your cluster. Now that we've described the pod, you can delete the pod using the kubectl delete command. And you specify the name of your pod. And if you try to get the list of pods again, you will see that no pods exist. So in this lesson, we covered what Kubernetes objects are, and we started to play around with the kubectl command to do basic things like setting your cluster context and listing, creating, describing, and deleting pods in your local cluster. Thank you.